So we've got the flower open. Rupert the Sauromatum is well open, as you saw in the last video. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start to chop up this inflorescence and see what's in there. So we're going to lay it down on a piece of paper and we'll have a look what we've got in there and explore the parts a little bit. Okay, so the first thing we want to do then is we're going to start chopping him up. But if you look down here, you probably can't see very well now because I've emptied most of it, but there's lots of what looks like dust, and it's actually coming from here. And these are the male flowers producing pollen. So basically, now I've cut the front out, and there's the front flap, if you remember, that was cut out. What we can do is we can start tipping out the pollen, and you can see it there. I'll show it you much more detailed under the microscope in a few minutes. But if we just literally tip it out like this, and then make sure that we can just brush off any extra that we've got on the top there on the male flowers, and then just make sure it's all tipped out. That means that we've now got, straight away, we've got all of that pollen saved. So you can actually put that in an envelope and you can save that, and you can try and pollinate another one of these flowers. So you can put that in the fridge and see if you can pollinate other flowers. So we'll have a quick look at that under a microscope in a few minutes. But for now, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to fold that up, make a little envelope like so, and then fold it in. And we'll just keep that somewhere safe out of the way, so we know we've got some pollen for this Sauromatum. And I'll just label that up as pollen, and I'll pop that in the fridge for now. So what we've got, the full length, we've got the tuber that we know of, and then we've got this little thing here which we think is the leaf, and then we've got this which is a peduncle, and then it goes into the inflorescence. So we're going to explore this bit mainly. So the first thing I want to do, and it's going to feel really, really savage, I am going to cut this off. So it will, this will really hurt for some people who followed along with this. So this essentially ends the inflorescence time. Now later on in the year, when we look at these in the wild out in the garden, this won't matter as much. So I'm just literally going to slice across there. And while I'm at it, I'm going to clean off some of these old bracts. So I'll snip them a bit cleaner later. But for now, that means we're back to a tuber with one spike. And a video after this one, we will come back to this tuber because this is now ready for the leaves. So we will plant this now, and or not now, but on the next video, and then we can move forward with the rest of the cycle. So we've now got a little bit of dirt on here, so we'll just get rid of that. Okay, so now we need to move down the inflorescence, and again, everything I'm going to show you now, I'll show you close up on the microscope in a minute. So the first thing I'm going to do, we've got this entire length here, and we don't really want to be looking at that for much longer, so we're just going to cut that off there, and you'll be able to see inside what is in there. And just to be really, really clear what's in there, I'll take a slice off the end, like so, and then I'll take a really thin slice that I can put on under the microscope. So that's too thin, actually. So just literally as least amount as I can. Something like that. If you can see that, I don't know whether it's focusing. And then what we'll do is we'll put that on one side and we will use that on the microscope. I'll actually get another piece of paper for that. What we'll do is we'll just prepare a list of things that we want to have a look at under the microscope. So I'll just lay them out on here and you'll be able to see it under the microscope later on. So that's the first bit. We've had a look at the spadix. It's the same all the way up, so I don't really need to see any more of that. So that can go on one side. Out of the way. Now, what we have got is we want to have a look at this, maybe have a look at this pattern under the microscope on the inside of the spade. So we can snip some of that off as well. And this bit's better with scissors, so we'll move the knife out of the way. We'll just snip that off there. That's more than enough to have a look at there. So we'll just snip a bit like this, and that gives me a little sliver, and that means I can have a look at it both the back and the front and see what it looks like under the microscope. So again, we'll just pop that next to the other one, and that'll be ready for us to have a look at. So we'll move everything out of the way now that we don't need. So we're now getting down to the sexual parts. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut away all of this, which is the spathe tube. So everything from here down is the spathe tube, and we don't really need any of this now because we've slit it open there and you can see the sexual parts here. But what is best now is if I come down here and carry on where I started here, and I'll just come round and just literally go like 2 or 3 millimeters in and just remove the entire spathe tube like so. You'll see it come off in a moment. Just come all the way back to the front and it should drop off like so. And as you'll see now, there you go. So that is Ceromatum venosum spathe tube, and look at those colours. Now it's about a 2 mil wall. You can see here it's about 1.5 to 2 millimeters thick wall, and it's got these spongy white cells in the middle, you know, quite rigid, turgid cells, and then it's got this really black burgundy colour here, and you can see the dusting. Hopefully you can see the dusting of where the pollen was at the bottom. So we'll have a look at that, and then that goes up into the top and into this much lighter pattern up here. So I might actually just slice that across now. So slice that down like so, and that means you can see it really nicely. So it's still quite rigid, you know, it's still quite solid, so it would have carried on for quite some time. So that looks good. So we don't really need to see that under the microscope, but I will photograph that before it shrinks. And that leaves us with this lovely little assembly here. So this is the peduncle coming up to what was the entire inflorescence. And then we're down to the really, really detailed bits. So I'll explain it here and then we'll go into the microscope. So we start at the bottom here with the female parts. These are the flowers. And if I just point to them here, it's these bits here, the reddish bits that we're looking at. The yellow bits that stand over the top are the thing that basically, these little protrusions, when an insect comes in and travels down here, either flying or climbing on the inside wall of here, or on the spadix itself, they get to the bottom and they can get trapped down here, and then they start walking around inside all of that pollen. So they get covered in pollen, and then as these shrink back, they go back out, and hopefully they've got pollen to pass on to the next one. So, and there's a good bit of distance between here and here. So they come all the way down here. They might get a bit of pollen on them there, but the important bit is all of this in the bottom. And as you can see when I poured it, and what you can probably see now is most of the pollen was down at the bottom here. And hopefully these don't self-seed. So hopefully, you know, the pollen that gets passed onto these female flowers here, onto the stigma basically, hopefully they're from another plant. I don't know if mine have ever self-seed or whether they can even self-seed. But what we'll do is we'll have a look at them close up on the microscope. I love the colour here, this blending from this like, you know, creamy lemony colour up to this red and the dark burgundies. And hopefully if I go really close, you can see how amazing that structure is there. So from the female flowers here to the little protrusions that help keep the insects down here, and then onto the main spadix, and then up to the male flowers there. Now, unlike some of the other aroids, so like unlike arum, there's nothing that stops insects getting out here. On arum, you find them up here, but we've only got them down here on, you know, and they're called staminodes. On here, we've just got them at the base. So that's basically everything we want to do. So what I probably can do now is I can probably chop this up a little bit more, ready for the microscope. So we want to see the male part. So that would be all of that. So we want to get up close, get a really good close-up of that on the camera, on the microscope. And then we don't really need any of this main bit, so we'll chop this off about here. There you go, and you can see the inside quite clearly. And all of these parts here. So now we've done what I wanted to show you, we can actually cut this back even further. So I'm going to cut a little bit closer. So just a circle all the way around like this. Like so, and that'll make it a little bit easier for me to get it on the microscope. And we can also just chop it there as well, like so. Now a good thing to do if you want to have a really good look at this is to split it again, but just split it all the way down the middle. And then what that will do is, I'll do that now, that should then give me the ability to lay it flat. That's that one done. And then let's go down all the way down without knocking any of these off. So what that does now, it gives me a nice picture of what's going on inside. And also when I put it on the microscope, it'll lay down flat. And that is how I would present it to the microscope, so I can have a good look at all of these parts. So let's whip over to the microscope and we'll see what we can see on there. So this is the microscope I'm going to use for today. This is called an Adonstar, and it's got a 2K screen and then 3 different lenses. So it's got all the way down to, you know, a very strong magnification, and then 2 lesser ones which are much more useful for things like circuit boards and, you know, just checking out small things but not microscopic. So let's put what we've put on the piece of paper in front of this, and we'll have a look at it in the lens that we've got on currently. Okay, so we've got a full sheet of parts of the Saromatum under the microscope now. And again, this isn't the highest magnification at all. This is actually the second lowest. So all I want to have a look at is, you know, to have a basic look at the structures. So this is simply the inside wall of the spathe. So this is the spathe tube, and as you can see, it's got some, you know, you can't get down to cellular level, but you can just see the different colorations, the different pigments in the cells. So that one's quite cool to have a look at. So what we want to do is start at the bottom, and then we'll work our way up. So we'll move this over, and we'll have a look here. So this is just the peduncle. So this is the thing that holds the inflorescence up, and you can see there it's got the dotty pattern, and it's just different coloured pigments, different coloured cells. You can actually see, if I put my finger in here, let me just get really close. At the tip of my finger there, I need something to point with actually, so I'll get a little tiny knife. You can see little grains here. You can see one there and one there. They are little grains of pollen that have just got, you know, disturbed and are just accidentally, you know, come onto this surface here. If we move over to the side, you can see there, and what's that? Is that a hair? That's just a hair, literally sat on the surface there. Or if it's not a hair, it'll be a string of cells that have just been snipped. But you can see there, basically you can see the xylem and the phloem really. You can see the, you know, the vascular bundles, the vascular tubes that will go up and down inside this. And then you can just see this very thin, you know, bit of pigment here. So you can see how shallow that pigment is. So it's only on the surface cells there. So that is the inside and outside of the peduncle. So now what we need to do is move up to the reproductive female parts. So we'll move over here and we'll have a look, starting at the base here. So it comes up from the peduncle here, this bit, and this here is the base of the spathe tube. And you can see the cells there, like spongy cells in the middle there, and then, you know, as the cells get to the edge, and then you've got the cuticle on the outside edge, and you can see that you know, you can see that the coloration is just on those surface cells, so that's cool to see. And then you move up into the spathe tube proper to, you can just see the edge of all of the dropped pollen down here, and we'll have a look at the pollen on a different lens. You can see it there a little bit better. I've just zoomed in a little bit, so you can see the pollen all along here and all along here. and then it goes up onto the spade, onto the spadix proper, and then we get these little things. So these are basically the female flowers. So these will be the sticky stigmas that will take the pollen. So you can see actually quite a bit, bit of pollen has fallen, but that would only allow it to be self-fertilized, which we don't, self-pollinated, which we wouldn't want. But these are the things that if they do get pollinated, then they start to ripen. And this here, this whole assembly here is all that would be left. And that would form the little the little black balls of basically berries that become what bears the seeds if it gets fertilized, or if it gets pollinated. I keep saying fertilized. And then above that, we've got these structures, which are the things that, hold the insects down. I'll just zoom in for you and just get a bit of focus. Now these things all dangle down. As you can see, they've got a bit of pollen on them, but that's just because it's dropped from above. And these things basically point downwards, and then when an insect has come in and got through down here, if you imagine this is in a tube, then they find it difficult to climb back up out of here, especially if they're flying. They can't fly past this stuff. So that's the whole function of these things, is to keep insects down below it and to get them to go on to as much of basically get on the flowers, the female flowers, as much as they can, so pollinate them as much as possible. So if you look at them then in the cross section, you can see how deep they go. So these are, let me just zoom that in, just focus in. So this is a cross section of the unripe or the unpollinated stigma there at the top, and it would go down into here, and then that would become the seed, as I've said. This is the middle of the center of the spadix that goes all the way up, and then that's a cross section of the parts that just dangle down as well. So you can see that yellowy bit goes in a little bit there. And then basically from there we move up to we basically start moving up the length of the spadix. So I can actually we can actually walk along the length of that spadix with this here. So you can see those really long really long cells, actually really long striations all the way up to the top, and you can see it inside there. And then that moves up to the male part, which is here, and this is where the pollen is generated. So you can see here, more accurately right at the bottom here, you can actually see the pollen there. And we'll go on to a much closer lens in a moment and have a look at that. But that's where the pollen's created, and that drops down or gets touched by an insect, and then they take it to another flower, hopefully. So let's move over to a better lens and have a look at some of those things in more detail. Okay, so we'll go the other way now. We'll go back down. You can see how much closer we are now. And if I just show you the tip of my knife there, it's incredibly small now. But that would probably show you a little bit better what the pollen is like. So these male flowers have now started to yield lots and lots of pollen. That's what's dropped out into the lower part of the spathe tube. So I can still harvest pollen if I wanted to. There's still lots and lots of pollen on here, so I will actually scrape some of that off later on. And as you can see, I'll move it around a little bit here. There's plenty there's pollen everywhere, so it's generating millions and millions of pollen grains like so. So we'll move from there back down the spadix, and we'll just have a quick look at the spadix close up. So you can see again the cells of the spadix. I'll just zoom in or just improve that focus a tiny bit. And there you can see that is the, moving down the cells of that spadix. And then back down onto the female parts, or above that is just this is the parts that hang down. As I said, these are the bits that keep the insects down. I'll just bring that into focus a bit more now. You can see there there is definitely pollen on them that's dropped, but that makes there's no sense in having that. That's not needed. There's no evolutionary need that I know of to have pollen going onto these things because they're sterile. They're just simply there as a functional use. They look a bit like teeth there, don't they? You can see the berries quite clearly. They're unfertilized at this point, obviously. And then the last bit we'll do is we'll have a good look at, come down here and have a good look at the or as close as we can get without going into the really macro lens. You can see there the top of that's each of those is what receives the pollen. So there's a pollen grain for each of them. If that's the desire, is that a pollen grain would get into each of these little berries, and then they would become pollinated. And then if we just look down, you can see the cells a bit more now, so you can see the pigment a bit better. It's always nice to zoom in like this, and you can see how it looks like a little dark patch. When you look at it closely, there's a lot going on in these cells here. And then down onto the final bit, which is the peduncle. So again, we'll just have a quick look at what the cells look like, the colour of the cells. See there on the edge. So that is it. That's all of those parts now. That's Rupert chopped up. We've had a good look at how those sexual parts work and all the functional anatomy of this Saromatum venosum. So next we will focus on growing the foliage. I really hope you're enjoying these videos, and if you are, please give us a thumbs up. It does help us to get in front of other people who might like this kind of thing. And if you're enjoying it enough to give us a thumbs up, then why not subscribe to the channel, and you can follow along with stories like this all about the Saromatum venosum.